2 trillion, KRA surpassed with a surplus of 16.81 billion. Osido, you've been quite vocal in terms of revenue matters and taxes. So does this deserve a pat on the back? Yeah?
They have been listening and watching this show. And that is good to KRA. Now, moving on, Jesse, is for us to ask, where is that money going to? That money has to resonate with service delivery. Because when you generate revenues, and I'm sure that Treasury and CRA, Commission on Revenue Allocation for county governments, the Senate, and basically all stakeholders have put their hands on deck to ensure that, the country is able to raise resources. And the institution that is charged with that sole mandate is really KRA. I also have to thank them for the integration that they are now having with county governments, because you realize that a lot of the county revenue mechanisms are also quite integrated with the national government's Kenya Revenue, basically Kenya Revenue Authority, and therefore that locks out loopholes, Jesse. Okay. And part of why that is also happening is because of the goodwill that we have, because every day we quote the president and we say, Kenya loses 2 billion shillings. Where is that money going to? And what should that money be doing? So KRA, I am sure that they have now picked up the responsibility, and they are working with citizens wherever they are across the 47 counties and across the entire country to ensure that revenue is being raised. The question that therefore will beg is, what is that money doing? Because the more we enhance and expand infrastructure, the more the resources will be able to raise, and the more money that KRA will also be able to bring on board. Jesse, part of why that is also happening is the strength of the legislature, the Senate, the National Assembly, and even the county assemblies, who are also out there, generating or coming up with laws that support counties to be able to raise resources. But much more fundamental is also to note that we are within the context of COVID-19, and so a lot of waivers have also been laid, which therefore begin to present spaces where KRA probably was not very keen. So why that again was happening? Because they noted that there was a slowing down on revenue generation, because remember that there were levies and taxes that some county governments had put off. So when KRA noticed that the negative curve was that the curve was going down, they had to, of course, pull their socks and ask themselves, why is this happening? And I'm sure that that's partly why they put in more energy. And we are now seeing the positive, the curve is growing from a positive trend.
Okay, Martins, we all know the importance of increasing the tax base expansion. So with bearing in mind the digital service tax, minimum tax, voluntary tax disclosure, amongst others, was this sort of a good move?
Yeah, I think that adds to it, Rogers. But as I give them kudos, I think it's a step on the right direction. I'm yet to see from where did they make these gains. Because we had always said that there are two areas where we lose money in this country. One is the loopholes themselves. And second are the tax evaders. And they're not little people. They're not those Wanjikus. They're those businessmen who make deals and reduce their taxes so that they don't pay what they are supposed to pay. If they could do that and expand the tax base, I think we can even do more than 2 trillion, so to speak. We are losing a lot of money in this country. But the people are faithful, especially the little guys. They are very faithful. They pay their taxes without any reservation. The problem was just these big guys who know how to talk deals out of it. That's one of the things. I think Osindo is also right. The systems were also to be improved so that they can become seamless in collection. We were losing a lot of taxes because some people were making their own receipt books and all this. But when we go digital, I think that was not very easy to steal. So I would like them to digitalize help even counties do more on that point. The other issue which Cindy also alluded to, collecting taxes is one thing. What you do with those taxes, because the reason why people pay taxes is what Jesus said. To the government, give them theirs. Mine is also different. So people are paying taxes in anticipation that they can also get good services to them. Roads, water, health, all these. Now, if they do that, we have increased, and yet we don't see any change at all where those taxes have come from. That is where we are concerned as legislators. That this is not right. This is robbing Paul, and you're paying somebody else. So if you rob Paul, you have to give back Paul what he deserves. But I think there is a step on the right direction, and I'm yet to find out or read more where they seal those loopholes and where they made those gains. But I think I stay with my kudos. Let them continue.
Okay. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. So, Sido, alternative dispute resolution. I know Martins has touched on it briefly, but tax evasion is definitely a challenge in this country. Was this a proper way in terms of an amicable solution with disputes with the Kenya Revenue Authority?
Of course, and I'll tell you from what I know, like for instance, counties that had tax evasions and even governors. And when their faces were on the front pages of the newspapers, of course you ask yourself, what does this tell about me? And so you walk into KRA, like as Kevin Osido, I have done that. I have walked into KRA and I have asked, do I have any penalties? What are the gaps that I have? And they told me how much money I owe, which I have not remitted or whatsoever. And I am in the process of doing that with the KRA. And that really is an example of part of why alternative dispute resolution mechanisms work, just so that you don't wait for KRA to come with the KRA police, and then you are being arrested, and is drama, particularly when you can be able to talk about it. I have also seen that Siaya County government has summoned, other statutory state agents to be able to share what challenges the assembly has and whether there are any gaps that, certain remittances that have not been made. Those are examples of positive steps that we are making, Jesse. And if people can be able to just take that patriotic duty and citizen responsibility to come out and say, I don't want to be in the negative books with the tax master. What can I be able to do? And KRA has set up itself into regions, into counties. Nairobi is divided into different regions. Different counties also fall within different regions, and they have officers to whom you can be able to reach out and talk to them about your issues. And those are positive steps that, therefore, should be able to deal with issues of tax evasion. And also, lastly, Jesse, KRA has enhanced its communication mechanism. You receive text messages on SMS, you receive emails, quite a number of times you see them. And that is also positive. And so I believe that the tax master is taking us to the right direction when it comes to issues of taxation.
Okay, away from the tax masters right now, let's talk about civil servants, Martins. And top-performing civil servants are set to get cash bonuses under the new public service reward scheme that might also get their counterparts sacked for low productivity. And I mean, low productivity has been a challenge within the civil service. Might this actually bring up the performance management, or it's just a borrowed formula from the private sector? But what do you read from this?
No, rewarding civil servants is appropriate, and I think it has been long overdue. In other developed countries, civil service is a career, and people who are in civil service really love it, and they don't want to get into politics. They just want to do that. So giving them those bonuses is one thing. But what I believe in, because to some extent, bonuses will be just a drop for some people who are engaged in practices that have made money and all that. But what I think will bring civil service to effectiveness is performing contracting. That is, you just don't employ people on permanent and pensionable. They just leave their jackets there to work, and they go do their own business. It doesn't work like that. Performance contracting means you are assessed every period of time according to the contract. If you are productive, you are rewarded. If you are not, you are let go. So that knowledge that I know my review is coming, and some are there are small steps of reviewing how you are doing. including 360, even what your colleagues say about you and your boss and all that. You get even reviewing yourself this month, what have you achieved as a civil servant in this office? That makes people wake up. So bonuses, yes, but let us also, because some people are jittery, oh, if I'm let go, I will lose my benefits. No. There are some which are carried towards retirement. But there are some which we will lose because you are not working effectively anyway. And that will also give other people a chance who really want to work for the government. So those combined will revive our civil service. But I think bonuses are good. They should be tied to productivity and percentages, because sometimes you bonus people who are just lazing around. That's also not a good training.
Quite so. I think umegonga ndipo. So ile wanasema hivyo. The regulations actually require each body or state agencies to set up a performance contracting committee that will sort of set the targets and monitor and evaluate performance. But Osido, as you talk about this, corruption is still a concern within the civil service. So might this help in stamping out this vice within the civil society?
Kenya is on the right track in terms of our human resource and performance. And the beauty of this, Jesse, is that we are also learning from other countries. And every time I hear people talking about Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, Thailand, those are the basics of what they are doing. In fact, during the days of Dr. Lee Kuan Yew, may God rest his soul in eternal peace, the things that Mheshimiwa is talking about, where you walk into an office and you put a jacket and you disappear, Dr. Lee Kuan Yew used to walk into public service centers or offices, and anyone who should be there from, say, 8 to 5 and you are missing, you are either put on disciplinary action or you are sent home. But that it should not get to that level. It should be a patriotic duty. As an individual, why am I in that office? Am I there to put a jacket and disappear, or why exactly am I there? So we are learning from very positive lessons, and awards to public servants, civil servants through bonuses is one way of doing it. As Mheshimiwa has also rightfully said, there could be several other ways. Putting in place committees is an add-on, because you have your own peers who are looking at you and they are saying, hey, Kevin Osido, you have not been at work for the last 4 days. Tuseme tu kweli. And then you cannot argue with it, because this is either your director or your immediate supervisor, or part of that committee could even be your junior, like a driver, who knows where you go to every day and where you are coming from, what time you are picked from work, what time you go for lunch, depending on how that committee is going to be assembled or to be composed, Jesse, is a positive step. But again, you see, we also have presidential awards, the HSCs, the EBS, the CGH, all those awards should also move towards looking at civil servants and telling them, anybody among you can be awarded by His Excellency the President. It doesn't have to be specific special people, depending on how much you work, so that you don't sit there just waiting for bonuses in terms of financial terms, but that you can also get those very lucrative titles that really add a lot of value to the CV of our public servants, because through that, then you have promotions. Through that, you are moved to the next level of your class or of your employment cadre.
Okay, let's talk about state corporations or state-owned entities briefly, Osido, because what comes to mind? Kenya Airways, Kenya Power, Kenya Railways, they seem to have had a couple of issues despite the billions of shillings transferred from the exchequer. Because when you look at the socio-economic benefits on one side and the amount of money from the taxpayer used on the other, it raises concern. So what say you about the productivity of these state-owned entities?
State-owned entities and all these things we call SAGAs, semi-autonomous government agencies, should respond to service delivery. So that the question that we ask is, why do we have the government of Kenya own Kenya Railways or Kenya Airways or whichever, even some banks? It's supposed to be looked at from the perspective of profits that then accrue back to government for certain services to be delivered. So that if it is Kenya Railways, Has the ownership of, by government improved transport, for instance? Would it be better to have an SGR which is 3 times more than the cost, that also does not do even up to half, as opposed to having a government-owned entity that is supposed to set its own rules and ensure that even it plows back in terms of profits or productivity, which is not what we are seeing here today, Jesse. We have Kenya Railways, or Kenya Airways rather, we have Kenya Airways being bailed by government every day, as opposed to other entities like KMC or Rivertex, So my way of looking at it is also coined to the discussion we were having just before this on employment and TVETs and education. How do we ensure that these state-owned corporations borrow from already ongoing government policies? Are we training pilots to get into Kenya Railways, or do we have other private entities training pilots and then getting into Kenya Airways, and they are charging government more money in terms of the number of hours they fly this flight? So a lot of conversations need to take place, but it is the responsibility of any government to protect the interests of its people. So if Kenya Airways is not performing, it is really the responsibility of the government through the Ministry of Transport and the Kenya Airports Authority to ensure that measures are put in place so that that particular entity is responsive to its responsibility. Otherwise, you close it down, and Kenyans know that now we do not have Kenya Airways or whatever entity or whatever agency. Because why those things are happening, lastly, Jesse, is for efficiency. You have a transport system that is government-owned, that is going to be efficient to the people and also to productivity of the country. And that is really a global conversation, because Kenya Airways, for instance, doesn't just run within the airspace of Kenya. It goes all the way to the US and other continents. And so that really, in my way of looking at it, Jesse, should be the reasoning behind government owning certain entities, so that efficiency, productivity, and then GDP issues of the economy really become at the center stage, other than employment, because again, people who get employed in these entities are Kenyans, other than a few foreigners who become part of the human resource or part of the employees because of their technical expertise or technical skills.
Okay, well noted. They will definitely continue to talk about these state-owned agencies. But Martins, let's talk about the steeper or the higher electricity bills in the country. Households and businesses may face this higher cost of conducting business due to perhaps the current vagaries of COVID-19. But according to EPRA, that's the Energy Petroleum Regulatory Authority, the price of fuel cost charge for August has increased to 3.77 Kenya shillings per kilowatt hour, up from 3.3 per unit last month. So it's a small increase, roughly 0.14 Kenya shillings per month, but this will definitely hurt some of these businesses that heavily rely on electricity as a source of energy. So what say you about this?
It's true, and it's all linked to what Cindy have said. To me, I would have a radical approach to all this. Government agency, yes. Government state corporations, no. The government does not know how to do business. In fact, the work of the government is to provide enabling environment, period. Because once you mangle this up, that you have state appointees to lead this corporation. Back then, they were told, I need this much money for Arambi, bring it quickly. Whether you budget it or not, it is gone. So what we should do to these state corporations is to make them autonomous and let the leadership be resourced competitively. That is what makes business business. Otherwise, if they anchor huge the way they are to the state, they are still going to make losses. And from the parliamentary point of view, we have been pumping a lot of money in Kenya Airways. It's just a bottomless can. It's nothing there. Even those colored Kenya Airways you see, those are individual stuff. There's nothing. So this needs radical approach, including power. Rogers, power. Everything, every business in a small household where they flake and a child can read depends on energy. I was reading an article. In the sub-Saharan Africa, we are listed as one of them, which has not only expensive access to power, but we also have inefficient and unreliable source of energy. Today it is there, in about 1 hour it's gone. So it's affecting all the business.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, people had an alternative. You could use nyangile, the lentil.
Yeah.
But the price of the kerosene has also shot up.
Yeah.
So if you ask me from my constituency how this works, it's really a total devastating part to the livelihood of our people. But sadly enough, because it is very fundamental for business, everything now will start going up. When energy goes up, everything goes up.
Mm-hmm.
The people do not have the purchasing capacity. That means another frustration. So we will be losing a lot of people. When people are frustrated, they do all sorts of things. So it's not a good thing. I don't know who is advising EPRO, but I think these are the areas where government should step in. If for real reason they have to increase, the government should have subsidy so that the common man is not affected. I think as it goes now, the Committee on Energy and all that, we should have to take it up and find out how we can also cap all these increases and what the government should play should we have those surges so that the common man can also breathe. Right now we are not breathing, Rogers, and it's very sad for the people.
And of course, we well understand the link between inflation and the cost of energy as well. Those producers will definitely push up the prices of goods and services, and at the end of the day, some households are still reeling from the effects of COVID-19. So, Sido, as we finalize, I was just reading an article, and power purchase agreement sort of stood out between Kenya Power and the independent power producers. And interestingly, President Uhuru Kenyatta in March actually appointed a task force to look into these PPAs between Kenya Power and independent energy producers to sort of regulate the power, renegotiate energy prices, and other terms downwards. What do you add to this?
Now you're asking me a very difficult question, because sometimes we have had a president who makes directives and no one even follows them. And we have seen that with COVID-19, particularly on online procurement issues, e-governance concerns. And what you're raising, PPAs between Kenya Power and independent power producers is another issue, because when the President of a Republic speaks, citizens should be able to resonate with what he is saying, so much such that. And you see, the President will not speak that you increase the cost of power, because his interest is the interest of the citizens. And the citizens are saying the cost of power is way too high, we cannot match it. And it's because in the first term of this government, they used to tell us the last mile. You remember the discussions about the last mile? We want to power every corner of this country. The economy is going to be powered. But powering it how? We want to use solar, or are we going to use Kenya Power, which is very expensive? And so from the committee, the task force that was put in place, Jesse, we need to revisit the findings. Why is the cost of power high? And what measures have been put in place? And you're asking this in the context, again, of the upcoming devolution conference, whose rallying call is multi-level governance for climate action. And so we want to ask ourselves the questions around what actions have humans put in place to safeguard climate change, and what actions has government put in place to also safeguard the interests of the citizens to safeguard climate change. And part of that is really looking at the cost of power, because if we increase the cost of power, then the korobois that Mheshimiwa is talking about are going to be all over the country. So look at the amount of trees that are going to be cut down. Look at the amount of rivers that are going to die, because we cannot have trees to help fetch this water. Look at the kind of even illnesses that we are going to have. So the cost of health from government is also going to go way too high. So Jesse, the PPAs are a big concern, and industries also, as independent power producers organize themselves and form networks, I believe that Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and even civil society organizations like County Governance Watch that engage on climate change need to also organize so that we can be able to have a negotiating power on behalf of the citizens. As they meet following the President's orders, let these civil society organizations and other interested parties also meet and then present memoranda and issues around why the cost of power is high and what needs to be done, so that we're also not just complaining, Jesse, but that we are also taking action in coming up with the effective mechanisms to address those very difficult challenges that Kenyans are facing today.
Yeah, well noted. As closing remarks, Martins, I well know that we just received an extra batch of vaccines in the country. So in terms of the mass vaccination, you sitting in the health committee, perhaps add your voice to this when you also add in your closing remarks.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's very important, and thank God it's in. I would just urge the ministry, as they plan to do this, to go to this highest spot. Last time we talked about the Matatu, Border, all those who are mobile. Please don't keep this in hospital facility or dispensaries. Go out and vaccinate people. It's good to finish those vaccines than leave them until you start panicking because they are expiring. Now, in closing, I would like the executive arm of the government to consider a stimulus package for our people. People are hurting. And it is not just a word. It is real that other people are going hungry and waking up hungry, and they don't know when the next meal will come. And also when that is happening, kids are in the villages. They went to school, they are back home. Sasa kama sisi wajumbe, every call that you get is how a kid can get to school. And I'm tying that with what the ministry is saying all that. Don't chase kids. Now, this disconnect between the ministry and the school heads should be closed, so that when it is given a clear policy, help is there so that kids can stay in school. Right now, it's a headache, it's a nightmare for parents, it's a nightmare for leaders, and even children are traumatized. So they should address that as soon as possible.
Okay, the net effect is quite wide. Osido, your closing remarks, sir.
Jesse, protocol demands that when Mheshimiwa has spoken, what do I have to say? So mine is just to thank you for this time and to let Kenyans know that the future of this country is much more bigger to be left to politicians. Every day we wake up in the morning, ask yourself, what action are you taking to make this country better? Is it to blame, or is it to contribute in solutions? And the young people out there, we have been very innovative during COVID-19, and we continue to be. Let us safeguard this country and lock out the radicalization of the politicians, and let's organize ourselves on how we want to see this country in a better way for our generation and the generations to come. Thank you.
Well noted. I thought one of you would mention the BBI appeal process, but let's wait till Friday.
Oh, it's coming possible.
It's on Wednesday. I mean Friday. Friday, this particular week. Yes, but we'll see what the court decides. Of course, we'll respect that decision. Many thanks.
Part of that is why OCA cannot have a candidate.